Yeah, thanks guys for coming. Ah, before I start the presentation, I just have a general question. Can you raise your hands who's actually right now using MySQL? How many of you are one person, two, three, four, five? Okay, so you are kind of interested in migrating to Postgres in a way. No, no, yes, maybe. Okay. All right. Anyway, let me begin. So, just briefly about myself, I come from industrial automation background, so building stuff for machinery. But then I decided that my life was boring, started backpacking, traveling around Asia, and that all brought me to Singapore, where I incorporated a company called Kenzep, and that helped me, Wikikansi, and that helped me commercialize some of the products that will be used in today's presentation to answer the main question if it's worth migrating to Postgres or no. Yeah, this is the office, it's so-called Silicon Valley of Singapore, and yeah, got a couple of awards there. Um, but speaking about the products, right, that I've built, uh, they all have good traction. I'll touch on a bit more on them, and and all of them using MySQL. So why exactly MySQL? So I think the main question, the main reason why I'm using MySQL is simply because I'm already quite old. I've been coding for the last 15 years, and I think back in the days, LAMP stack was really popular. If you know what it stands for, Linux, Apache, MySQL, PHP. So I'm kind of PHP old school guy here. And but the question, like, is it still relevant to use MySQL these days? Like we're in 2025. So to give a bit more context about the projects that I've been building. So the first one is, it actually works here in Eastern Europe. It allows people without having any prior knowledge of professional CAD/CAM software, design complex construction elements and get the manufacturer directly from the factory, visualize 3D and all that stuff, right? So that uses MySQL. Second product is healthy food catering WordPress template, super basic stuff, but I have 1.4K sales, and I guess there's not a single country in the world where this product is not used. And finally, the project that I awarded in Singapore is for this boarding project for customs declaration. The only interesting part about it is being used by really famous brands like Universal Pictures, Gucci, and Johnson Johnson and others. So if MySQL works, then where's actually my problem? And I would say that as the complexity of software was growing, and so does the data structure. So I ended up using throwing all of my data in one single column, which is JSON. So I'm not using those multi-column structure, which kind of simplified my software architecture in a way. But as the data and complexity of data was growing, so does the syntax of how I was querying that information from the database. And that was my first concern, which I called a syntax-related concern. Because every time I was writing those queries like JSON set, JSON array append, so for every type of operation, you need to use a specific MySQL function, right? It's not just you can use JSON set for everything. And I would say that, I must say that MySQL documentation for me was not that user-friendly, and even AI was not really helping me. So I was kind of struggling here, and every time I was thinking that the codes don't really look nice. Uh, and for me, a nice-looking code is actually like walking in a nice city, right? I like Copenhagen, so I think it's a beautiful city, and same for codes, right? We can compare it here. But second concern, which is more important, is related to AI. So I wanted to create my first AI assistant that was capable to read customer requests and translate them to this new card design system. And for that reason, I had to create vector embeddings, right? But for in MySQL world, the answer to vector search was like, well, vectors? What is that? We are not handling vectors at all. So my conclusion was like that if you're using MySQL, and you want to use AI, so these things that simply not working together. I tried to build some workarounds, like a separate database, like Chroma DB, specifically for vector search, and that's how my API looked. I had to fork my codes into two different directions. But another issue that I faced was like data redundancy. I have to support two different databases, and then I have to update my data in both of these databases, and that actually was becoming like a nightmare. So summarizing it all, for me, uh, it was weird syntax when I was using MySQL. There's literally no vector support, and of 2025, it seems like we are really having way better alternatives. As long as you're into Microsoft products, then probably the only answer for you is to use SQL Server. I'm not sure if anyone using you here. But I also want to have a small note about Mongo database. I've been using that personally and really liked it. It's a NoSQL database, and I think has the most beautiful aesthetics of the syntax and codes when you're um, writing your apps, especially in combination with Node.js. But it seems like the owner is trying to monetize this database, and the vector search embeddings is not part of their core product, so you have to subscribe for additional service. So Postgres seems to be the one that where the folks going, and that's how I feel like 2024 last year it surpassed MySQL by popularity. So I decided that well, so many other databases are built on top of Postgres. So I decided, yeah, Postgres is the way to go. While everything looked nice, and I thought, yeah, let's do the migration. It turned out that database migration is not enough, right? I have a lot of code to migrate, and the interesting part is not just the queries that I have to migrate, it's also what follows after. And that was my main concern here, because you see, prior to migration, after migration, something actually changed here. So I thought that's mission impossible. Let's live into the next year. That was a year ago. So a year later, we are now. I decided, no, we still have to start with something. So I picked that one product, SCADA design, and decided like 5K lines of code, that should be manageable. So again, everything looked a bit murky, like how to handle that, so much stuff to do. But eventually I thought, okay, let's come up with a migration plan. So like number one is deploy Postgres, SQL, and Kubernetes. So prior to that, I was having my database running outside of Kubernetes cluster, but this time I wanted to experiment and actually put everything into Kubernetes. So like to see actually if it's a good idea. And second point, data migration. Third, working on my syntax. Then test everything out. Just wait for another week, just in case, to make sure everything works. So I estimated that the active stage of migration should take me around 1 week, right? And the rest, another week for just passive testing. It became easier. I thought to use some popular tools like MySQL dump, PG loader. In my ideal world, you have two databases, the old one, the new one. I'm just using those magical tool, and then my data flows from the old database to the new database. But those tools brought me nothing but pain. I think I spent around all day, even more. I was facing a lot of issues. I don't know why. It just didn't work for me. And eventually I gave up on using those tools. And right now I'm going to show you what actually worked for me. So that's the part is where I hope demo demons are not here. And I just show you how it worked for me. So the first step, I will create. So I'm using, just small note. I'm using this for my own Kubernetes automation. And the first step is I will just provision my PostgreSQL. And I'm using just a standard basic Docker container, Docker image here. I have multiple clusters, and I'm selecting the one that is in Germany, Nuremberg, used by Hetzner. So what happens now, I'm creating all these configuration files. I will show you in a bit. Here are they. So deployment, some CI/CD automation, endpoints like services, and also Docker file itself. So these files, is just a setup point. So now I can So now I can publish this this deployment to Kubernetes. So you can see my Docker image is being compiled. It's going to take us a bit of time. No, no. Yes, it's green. It's alive now. So the second app I deployed is probably the most basic like administration tool for data management. It's called adminer. So it's really basic, but it serves my goals. And I have it already installed to speed up this demo presentation. So what I'm going to do next is I go to this adminer dashboard. So here's it running under my Hetzner German cluster. Here I'm going to connect to my newly created Postgres database. So the server is actually the following link. I will connect to it inside the cluster. And for the password, I have a default one, which is, I guess, was Postgres pass, correct. Bad gateway. Postgres. Think so. Oh, okay. So what we see here is just an empty database. What I can do now is I need to create my structure. So I had my old MySQL database, and for that purpose, to export the data out and the structure of my MySQL database, I used MySQL DAM. So I guess you all know how this tool really works. And here's my MySQL table structure. I'm just using one table for all of my data. So Pro, that simplifies things a lot. And now I will try to convert to Postgres. I was actually surprised. I'm not sure if it's going to work now, but last time it even created me the indexes, which is cool. So it actually followed the structure. And I'm just throwing it here, hitting on execute. Okay, we have success, success, success. So we have created. No, guys, I did one thing wrong. I have to create my database first because here I'm just creating the table. Sorry for that. Create database cloud. I click save. Now SQL command, execute. And now yes, now I have my data created, right? So I created my structure of my database. And now the interesting part is I will log into my Postgres container, go to home ls, so it's empty right now, right? And I have this DB folder that is set to synchronize data from my computer with the running container in the cluster. And now I'm just clicking on this play button. That should, as long as I have good internet connection, drop my, you can see data SQL is now actually in a running container inside already in the cluster. And the last step that's left is I need to log in to Postgres. Okay. And now I'm executing this one simple command. All of these comments are provided in the slides. Oh, SQL. I'm so small. Thanks for pointing this out. That's why I sync so fast. Okay. Let me try again. Yeah. And now if I go back to this administration dashboard, click on select data, I have all of my data here. So I think like with this simple demo, I can show you like, I showed you how actually easy the old migration might be. And as long as you know what you're doing, it can take like literally less than an hour. So key takeaways here. I was using comma separated values as an intermediate format between these two databases, since none of the tools that I've been trying really work for me. The most basic one, so that's how the dump file looks like, is basically just values separated by comma. And I used LLMs to transform my SQL structure to Postgres. So before, after, right? Something we just covered. And also LLMs to rewrite the syntax of the code. Well, I think it's pretty straightforward, but yeah, I'm not going to show you, you know how LLMs work. We all got used to using it in EC in code. I have these slides, so in case someone's interested in migration, you can check it out. So the key comments here is MySQL dump to export data, then throw everything to your running container, and then those two purple ones to import data to Postgres. And also, I was experimenting with LLMs. At first, they didn't rewrite my codes properly, but I noticed if giving additional context, doing some prompt engineering, then actually it worked pretty well. Now we need to quantify the impact. And I'm not sure if you can see it clearly, but do you think that Postgres syntax looks better compared to MySQL? Or it's all the same? If you think it's a little bit better, you can raise your hands. Somewhat. Oh, you use dollars here. Here you use more chevrons. So how does it feel for you? All right. Um, what about the JSON set? Actually, in Postgres, quite a similar alternative. They use JSON B set, right? But what follows, I think, is more cleaner version in my opinion. And finally, the most important part is the vector support. So I created another column in my database, and it's honestly just magical. I can do the vector search, and I can like provide additional parameters like path to my some specific JSON values that I have in this JSON column to get me exactly that output that I need. And that all works in one database. So I think in my case, I spent actively around 3 days plus to achieve the vector embedding functionality and have what is my opinion is a better looking syntax, and also become a part of better ecosystem, which is being part of Postgres. So I believe I'm killing multiple birds in one shot here, which is really important that I'm using free and open source database. I can use vector embeddings, and I can basically continue building my apps and implement AI solutions there. And also, it's a relational database, but I can also use it in a NoSQL way. So NoSQL way, basically, in my case, it's just everything is JSON, and it works really nicely. So finally, I'm really happy. As a CTO, I'm really happy I made this migration. Answering the question, is it worth it or no? So coming back to those products I showcased to you in the beginning, I think 100% yes in the case of this designing platform, because it helped me build AI tools on top of the existing solution. WordPress doesn't make sense at all. It just old legacy software, let it be with MySQL. And when it comes to custom declaration port of Singapore, I'm kind of unsure because I'm not using anything AI related. Then maybe if next year um, AI can handle all of my code migration in just an hour without my involvement, I'll probably give it a try. But as of now, I think let it be where it is. So yes, but not always. And did everything go smoothly? Um, I think interesting thing to share here is that for my quotations, I noticed that all of them, for some reason, were without the tags, and I was like, what is that? What is going wrong? And I started to dig deeper, and here's the interesting part. So AI converted the syntax, and I have this VAT status, which I expected to get the value like 0, but in case of Postgres, by default, when it's 0, they just treat it as an empty value, and empty value can be just like that, literally. So, and because my frontend was receiving not 0 but a different value, which is empty, so that affected the way how value added tax was calculated. So the quickest workaround was to remove one chevron and then do another conversion on a code level. But the whole idea became between these chevrons. If you're using like one chevron, it returns you the data in a escaped way. If you're using two chevrons, it gives you the clean data that your codes can use. Um, Another interesting part here was like I think I have to do my prompt engineering properly, but I had this habit of adding limits to the end of my queries, and that's because let's say if you're having like hundreds of thousands of records in the database, and then you're running one delete operation, I'm a bit scared that maybe I did some mistake in my query and then just removes the entire thing. So I'm just adding limit to 1, so just in case I'm not removing everything. But in Postgres case, for some reason, they're only allowing limits in select statements, but not for updates and not for deletes, which is interesting. And the stack I've been using in production, Longhorn. Anyone knows? Okay, cool. In short, it helped me run my Postgres database in a way that whatever happens to my node, I need to update it, it falls down, my database still continue operates because the copy of the data is located on other nodes. So by default, Kubernetes doesn't have this functionality. pgvector for vector search. The most basic arrow format I know is just comma separated values to do the data exchange. And dev space. So under the hood, remember the interface I've been showing you in the beginning when I was creating Postgres. So under the hood, everything is basically dev space. I just put the beautiful UI, and it allows me to synchronize my dump file with the running container. So dev space is there. Create those deployment configuration files, publish everything to production, and really helpful. This tool is really helpful. Yeah, Cloud AI is LLM for conversions. And in case you need it, here's the link to GitHub. It's basically the template for this Postgres deployment that I've been using in this presentation. So build something in Kubernetes and create your Postgres there. So I think it's not that complicated as long as you know what you're doing. So let's connect. Feel free to text me if you have any questions. Other than that, thanks for listening. I hope that was useful. So did I win the bet? Yeah. Like tables? Primarily, I've been using that way, but I think imagine you have like okay dozens of different tables in your database, and then your app is changing, evolving. Some of them are not being used any longer, but for some old features they might be being used. And then you just your tables you can just have so many. It's just the software complexity that affects the structure of a database. And I made a conclusion that if I throw everything into one single column, it actually simplifies my software architecture. So basically, I'm not defining columns. I'm just creating a new structure of a data into one column, and I'm just going from there. I know that the software later should handle that, and it's way easier rather than to manage all these tables. But if we're talking about performance, right? So this might be a bottleneck because like the all of the apps that I showed to you here, they are kind of working. They have like a lot of this data and complex structures, but they will never be like a super big application where they have like maybe tens of even hundreds of requests every single second, right? So performance is kind of not a big issue there, but the convenience for coding is there. So when I was also mentioning about Mongo database, because it's a NoSQL database, right? Like and actually, kind of similar way, similar approach. So the way I've been using NoSQL with Mongo, I kind of adopted that to Postgres. So it's kind of a combination of both worlds. Yeah, exactly. So as you've seen, so I still have some columns here, right? Like reference basically is like my key. It's actually helpful. So this is my I also said like index on this key to improve performance. So imagine I have like millions of records, and some of the records are part of like e-commerce module on my product. So I'm using e-commerce product, then I use e-commerce settings. So e-commerce product may have thousands of products. E-commerce settings just one record, and then maybe e-commerce users, right? So and by filtering by this reference key indicator, it's actually kind of makes my query runs way faster. So it's like I have a huge database, but in the end of the day, when I'm using this reference key, I'm actually working with a small data sets, and then I'm working directly with the JSON. So it just works nicely. Yeah. No, WordPress is more terrible because it uses extra conversion. You know, it's just when I see clean JSON, it's easier, but they don't use clean JSON, right? They use like yeah, yeah. But yeah, I know when you're checking your raw data in WordPress, it looks kind of like what the hell happening? I don't get it. And maybe the moment you try to change something, it won't work because they count the number of characters as a value. So you have to count and update that indicator, which destroys the data. I don't know. It's really confusing how it works there. Yeah. Yeah. So that's the point. When I'm using, yeah, good question. Basically, right? MySQL dump, it generates me these two files, right? The data SQL is basically the structure of the database, right? No data here, just the structure. And then the second file is the actual data, and this data is free from anything related to MySQL because it's a comma separated value format. It's called CSV. It's basically like a text file with all of your data, just separated by um, quotes, and these quotes, in case you have some other inside those quotes, is cased by slashes. Yeah, exactly. So I converted this part uh, from MySQL to Postgres. Then I created this new Postgres schema that actually kind of a replica of MySQL. It just uses the syntax of Postgres. I run this query in Postgres to create the same structure. And once the structure is there, I'm just importing this dump file that doesn't have any relation with both of the databases in terms of structure, only following the sequence of columns. That's the only structure probably you can find it. Because first is the ID, second is like another ID, that's another ID, then I have a reference number, then you have the data, right? So first you have the ID, another ID, then the reference, and then you have the data JSON. Uh, LLMs are large language models, what everyone calls AI. Like basically, it's a neural network that helps us run these things when I've been, okay, I'll show you another example. So, well, this is Claude AI. You know Claude AI, right? You know ChatGPT. So these are all LLMs, right? So that maybe just the syntax. Um, yeah. Yeah. So basically, AI LLMs is the same thing in this context, to make it simple. Uh, I would say I was surprised that this thing every first time I tried just convert to Postgres, and I'm like throwing like that's it, it works. I'm like, how come? Like it just works, right? I'm like, wow. No, when it comes to coding, obviously you have to code, you have to check, and that's why I was mentioning about those limit statements. You remember? Because it kind of converted me. I had an impression though, oh, everything is done right now, but not always, right? So it was for me when I was approaching my codes, it was a bit of a trial and error because I see, oh, it converted, but then I'm checking in, no, something is actually wrong. And I give a different prompt, hey, consider those JSON decode conversions, maybe they have to be removed. Running again, oh, now it removes where needed, right? But it keeps where they have to stay. So same for limits and same for other stuff because all codes are custom, right? You need to know what I'm doing. Yeah, exactly. So like yeah, it's a bit of a personalized migration. So I mean, different projects may have different structures, different data sets, and it might be more complicated. I think why it was easy for me because of the table structure, I guess so. So surprisingly, it was actually faster for me to deploy the database faster than I expected in Kubernetes with all this data replication among multiple nodes. Do the data migration was relatively okay. When I started using CSV, it was easy, but when I tried to use all these tools, I felt I just spent a whole day getting nothing. Syntax update that took me, I guess, the most because it seems like oh, it's working, but then something fails. It's working, but then something fails. So that's I think the most time-consuming part, which is the actual code. ORM? How, how is it called? ORM? Is it for? I haven't checked on that. So mm. Yeah, you can see this is my example, my syntax. So that's basically one integrator. It's used by other integrators that are querying the API of that SCAR design platform. I can just probably um, run this syntax so you can see how it actually works. I mean, it's pretty obvious, but anyway, here's my code. I'm selecting this query. No, let's do this one, smaller. And now, like, I'm using like update or remove code conversions, like JSON decode, where necessary. That was my trial and error. And take into account that this JSON B type of Postgres is not just static JSON because LLM doesn't know. And when I'm running that, yeah, you can see now we have chevrons instead of dollars. And instead of all of these JSON decode now disappeared, right? But sometimes, if let's say we had one chevron here, then we should keep JSON decode here. So, and LLM was handling that pretty well. So, yeah. But again, it's personalized, as Luigi was mentioning. Yep. Yeah. Good. Can you understand this? I was reading logs and I saw more nonsense like that. I was Googling, I was throwing that stuff to LLMs, AI, Claude, ChatGPT, and it was giving me something, hey, your structure do not match, do this and that. I'm like doing this and that. I'm like, uh, I would say no, because for me it's a black box what's happening there. So I just, okay, that if it doesn't work, let's find something else. But I believe I hope I did something wrong though. So I hope, right? Because I mean, these tools have to work for someone. They're popular. So I think it's the first thing you have to go. Like if it's there's a ready-made solution, just use it first, rather than trying to build your own bicycle. So I think this one is relatively small. It has around 10,000 rows, right? So it doesn't take you much time to export, right? Even if it would be 100,000 of records, I still think it's going to take you less than a minute for both operations, exporting and importing. If it's millions of millions, if it's gigabytes, I still think you can handle that in relatively short amount of time. 50 minute. Mm, okay. You know, it's I think it's also a lot depends on the performance of your hardware and the configurations of a database, I guess. Because like recently I've been testing like Hetzner and DigitalOcean. Surprisingly, but I think DigitalOcean has the fastest hard drives in their droplets. And whenever I'm running those benchmarking tests for disk, I'm just impressed how fast their disks are actually working. And I also noticed that, something you see, oh, application works fast everywhere, on Hetzner, on Bolter, whatever. But one of these old CRMs, like one of my first projects, we had a lot of data there, and we're running old MySQL as well. And there are some reports that I need to generate on the fly. And I was trying to do the test migration to Hetzner. I kind of copy pasted all of my configurations, but if I couldn't make it work fast. The delay was like a couple of seconds. But DigitalOcean, you can feel the delay, but it's still I think within a second. And then just my only conclusion was probably because of the hard drives, because the hardware is faster. Because in Hetzner I tried both, using like a VPS version and using like a kind of bare hardware something. It was a bit faster, but DigitalOcean was still faster. So I think it's not just about the software. I think it's mostly about what's behind it. Let's say if you're using your database on a separate network drive, that must slow down as well because you have this latency going on. So for some cloud providers, they may use specific fast hard drives for databases specific. So the way I'm implementing it is in the Kubernetes cluster. Probably this is great for my apps, but it might not be the best of the art solution for super big and load intensive products. So I think it all depends. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. 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 answer from a side. So for my Singaporean data center, I'm using Oracle, Oracle cloud provider. And honestly, every time I log into their dashboard, I feel like I need to become a PhD first in order to understand what's happening there. It's the most confusing dashboard I ever like. If I'm speaking about in the context of cloud providers, so I have a feeling that because everyone's concerned about MySQL when this licensing issue in Oracle, they thought maybe they're gonna monetize the database, and that's why alternatives like MariaDB emerged at that time. But I just honestly feel maybe they just don't care. It's a good asset they have, but they're such a huge corporation. They're earning money on something else, and for them it may be just that's what I thought of, but I couldn't implement it. So the tricky part about MySQL is that you can install this vector thing, embedding thing, right? Which is like okay, but at least by the time, maybe half a year later, or yeah, around that time when I was checking that, I couldn't find convenient tools to actually manipulate my queries with MySQL that relies on these vectors. It's just you kind of need to start with DOM, but they're not really like fully ready for production. So and then I realized, oh, how come? Because I thought MySQL should make it work, right? But somehow it's like, yeah, you can store those vectors in a database, no problem. But the question is how you can query them, how you can use different methods, the cosine and different types of built-in functions. So I think MySQL just doesn't have them, which is interesting. Could be, but also when I check their documentation, maybe it's just the Oracle thing. You just read a lot and I don't know. It's not. It's like I feel like it's something like 15, 20 years old, right? Even for the new features, I'm like, they're not really kind of trying to make it like a best, most relevant database for today's needs. They have their niche probably, like WordPress, they're probably going to use them, but I'm not sure that's going to be a database of choice for new stuff, especially taking into account Postgres and so many other new databases that are emerging these days. Timestamp, sorry. Yeah. Oh, yeah? I didn't know that actually. 28, you say, right? 38, 12 year. Which means no future. But I guess they're gonna make some patch there. Just next release of MySQL, and I think they can fix that. But interesting, I didn't know that. Which means you cannot store timestamps of some future dates. Like, interesting. Yeah, I let's try to search something now. Will that count as complex enough? This looks kind of have a lot of stuff, right? And I can try to throw that into the um, into the dashboard here. So we're gonna create table stories. Okay. Hey, what the hell happening? Okay. Now, so ready, right? I don't know what's gonna happen now, but it's gonna create a new table called stories and create a couple of indexes here. Here's the data structure looks like. Okay, execute. So let me check. I have stories, integer. You know what's interesting? Like here I have int 11, and here at 10 you have integer, no number. But here I have variable 30 lengths and have a variable 30. So there are no lengths for integers. Maybe just the way how it works in Postgres. I'm not really sure yet. But uh, so here we set the default value, and here we set the length of integer. But here we only set the default value for all integers, but we don't set the length of the integer. But you see we have small int and we have integer. So that implies that we actually have a specific length for predefined integer formats in Postgres. Yeah. So my conclusion, if if we're using integer for rate, then rate is relatively small number or not the biggest one. But if we're using, let's say, like Jado, which is small, here we have Jado just one. So basically, small int means we have only one kind of one digit. Yeah, one digit. Maybe MySQL they use twice, but that looks legit to me. Did I made it? I think so. So no more questions, or still someone wants to? Oh, can I make picture? Yeah. Yay!